Before we go, I'm going to timestamp this. I will pull this out and do a separate video. But if you're here, there was some breaking news. So thank you to Kendra for pointing it out to us. So I'm going to go through that. The breaking news from our friends over at Us Weekly is that RHOA alum Kandi Burruss' ex, Todd Tucker, demands.
It began like any other unremarkable morning. The kind where nothing breaks. The kind where nobody expects history to fracture. Then everything snapped. Todd Tucker didn't just step into a courtroom. He stormed it. Not asking to walk away, but demanding to take everything. Not a quiet divorce. A full takeover. Custody of the children. And a frontal assault on the contract that once protected Kandi's empire. In a single legal blow, the man she once stood beside became the man trying to dismantle her entire world. The internet locked up. Timelines went blank. Fan pages crashed under shock. And Kandi Burruss disappeared. The woman known for never holding her tongue didn't say a word. And that's where the shadows crept in. Because whispers from the inside say this wasn't heartbreak. This was choreography. Every smiling dad photo. Every family man moment. Every clip fans used to repost with hearts and captions. Now feel different. Like a campaign. Not affection. Like preparation. Not parenting. A record being built. Long before court was ever mentioned. While Kandi was trapped inside theater lights and rehearsal halls. Commuting city to city. Chasing contracts and curtains. Todd was preparing his strike. Documents now allege the children stay with him. That she's rarely home. That absence equals unfit. And the prenup? Labeled a trick. Branded a setup. Signed in haste under emotional pressure. One line. One claim. And a decade-long marriage ignited into a legal war zone. As the internet split down the middle, memes flew like missiles. And Mama Joyce went viral all over again. One thing became unavoidable. This wasn't about love dying. This was about control changing hands. And Kandi Burruss? She didn't watch the storm roll in. She woke up standing in the center of it.
The Real Housewives of Atlanta alum Kandi Burruss' estranged husband, Todd Tucker, is demanding primary custody of their 2 kids in the divorce court, Us Weekly can exclusively report. This is interesting because a lot of people pointed out that he was not in the Thanksgiving picture with Kandi and the rest of the family, including Kayla, his daughter. But Kandi...
It opened like any forgettable sunrise. Screens glowed. Mugs filled. Feeds rolled. And then... the world stalled. Not for a second, for an entire community. Because one headline didn't disappear. It burned. Todd Tucker had entered the courtroom. Not in silence. Not in secrecy. Publicly. Custody of the children. And a strike against the prenup. 2 actions. 1 document. And suddenly, the relationship people thought simply ended had actually exploded. The internet didn't scream. It went numb. Websites lagged. Private chats went nuclear. And comment sections turned into battlegrounds. And Kandi Burruss didn't speak. The same woman who built a kingdom with her voice vanished. No mic. No stream. No statement. Only silence. And silence, in this story, feels louder than guilt. Because when people started looking closer, something surfaced. And it didn't feel random. It felt engineered. Todd's social media suddenly looked different through a colder lens. Dad life. Game nights. Homework hugs. Gentle captions. Once comforting. Now, calculated. Not family moments. Receipts. Viewers rewatched old videos like investigators. Frames where Todd was present. Scenes where Kandi wasn't. Moments that once meant nothing. Until now. Until court became real. Whispers leaked from behind the scenes. This wasn't impulsive. This didn't begin yesterday. It had been forming quietly. Intentionally. And while Kandi was swallowed by stage lights, touring, working, rehearsing, Todd was assembling a case. A narrative. An image. Not for fans. For a judge. And once that paperwork hit the system, everything reversed. In one night, the man the audience adored now stood across from her. Not with emotion. With documents. Legal filings landed like punches. Sharp. Clinical. Merciless. They didn't mention love. They mentioned calendars. Addresses. Responsibilities. They claimed the children lived with him. They claimed she would be absent. They claimed the deal she trusted was flawed. Pressured. Hurried. Unfair. A handful of words in court language, decoded by the internet as, nothing is safe. And then came the questions. Doesn't that feel too perfect? Why now of all times? Why when she's away? This was mapped out. People weren't just confused. They were disturbed. This didn't read like love falling apart. It read like a chess match. Not emotion. Positioning. Like a move made on a board the audience never knew existed. And as the atmosphere thickened, one familiar name drifted back into the frame like fog. Mama Joyce. The internet did what it always does best. It ran wild. Jokes flooded timelines. Opinions turned vicious. Old footage resurfaced. People remembered the looks, the pauses, the tension people once called motherly concern. Didn't she call this years ago? Didn't she say something wasn't right? Whether prophecy or coincidence, her presence hovered over the headlines again. This time heavier. As fans rewatched interviews like courtroom footage, every reunion episode like evidence, two sides hardened into camps. No middle. No mercy. One camp swore, he set this up. This was a plan, not a reaction. The other fired back. She chased stages. The children stayed home. It wasn't discussion. It was a fracture. Then Kandi finally broke her silence. Not with tears. Not with fury. With restraint. One line. Clear. Careful. Cutting. I just want serenity and what's right for my kids. And then she vanished again. No accusations. No chaos. No drama. Just distance. And that quiet. Wounded deeper than any outburst ever could. Because it didn't come off like strength. It came off like collapse. The internet doesn't just hear words. It translates them. And what people felt in her voice. Burnout. But beneath the calm, another story began crawling through private circles. Quiet. Heavy. Dangerous. Sources close to the situation whispered what nobody dared post. That this was never only about the children. That custody might not be the destination. It might be the doorway. Because the moment a prenup is cracked, the floor shifts. Money changes tone. Property loses protection. Royalties get questioned. An empire becomes negotiable. Court moves don't just shape families. They rewrite futures. And then one industry insider finally verbalized what everyone else was afraid to admit.
Response to the divorce petition that Kandi filed. He said that their two children are currently in his care and residing with him in Georgia, while Burruss, who's 49, handles out-of-state work obligations. She just announced that she's going to be in & Juliet on Broadway until March here in New York City. The exes share a son, Ace, born on 2016, and daughter, Blaze, born.
And just like that, the narrative twisted. Again, this wasn't a breakup. It was a transaction disguised as heartbreak. Custody became leverage. Court became corridor. And paperwork turned into power. And Todd? He wasn't empty-handed anymore. Viewers started threading pieces together that once looked harmless. Years of passive tension. Subtle disagreements. Money arguments never aired. Now they didn't look minor. They looked unresolved. Because if that contract caves, so does everything under it. Every asset built together. Every check. Every stake. Open for dispute. When that truth settled in, the internet didn't just react. It spiraled. And sitting inside that spiral was a woman who made her life mastering control, now staring down something she couldn't negotiate. A courtroom. Fans flooded feeds with timelines. Side-by-sides. Receipts from years back. They weren't debating guilt. They were dissecting timing. Because when a strike lands during someone's weakest moment, it isn't coincidence. It's exposure. And in this moment, Kandi was gone. Out of state. Out of routine. Out of reach. Her voice muted. Her home unfamiliar. Her children somewhere else. That's when the papers hit. Not with noise. With intent. Clean. Cold. Deliberate. What followed wasn't absence. It was weight. And heavy silence. Usually signals the truth is still loading. Because people don't disappear when they're merely wronged. They disappear when they're broken. Or when something is coming. And Kandi? She wasn't shouting. She wasn't defending. She was retreating. And that unsettled everyone. Because in every Bravo tragedy, the quiet moment isn't the ending. It's the breath before impact. And as screens refreshed, as comments raced, as jokes hit unease, one thing became undeniable. This story had outgrown its headline. It wasn't about custody anymore. It was about control. About money. About identity. About survival. And somewhere inside it was a question nobody wanted to ask. But everyone was thinking, is Todd protecting his children? Or protecting access to something bigger? And the more fans reviewed the filings, the more that question refused to go away. Because the paperwork didn't speak in emotion. It spoke in entitlement. And entitlement doesn't cry. It claims. And Todd was claiming everything. And the most disturbing thing? Todd never raised his voice. No rant. No emotional outburst. No public meltdown. His silence was cold. Strategic. Sharp. While fans were screaming online, Todd was silent in real life. And silence like that doesn't mean confusion. It means preparation. Because what followed next didn't look emotional. It looked engineered. As court filings circulated, something else shifted quietly beneath the headlines. Language. The tone of the paperwork was surgical. Not defensive. Not desperate. Calculated. Every sentence stripped of feeling. Every paragraph built for impact. Not media. not fans. A judge. And that matters. Because when someone isn't trying to convince the internet, they're trying to win something else. What stunned fans wasn't just custody. It was the confidence behind it. Todd wasn't asking. He was asserting, stating, claiming. Court documents didn't suggest. They declared that the children are with him, that Kandi's career keeps her away, that the prenup wasn't fair, that it wasn't voluntary, that pressure was involved. When people reread the wording, something darker settled in. This wasn't damage control. This was an opening attack. Because challenging a prenup doesn't just reopen money. It reopens memory. It reopens every argument no one saw. It reopens moments that were once dismissed as relationship stress. It unlocks history. And history, once opened in court, never closes clean. Fans began revisiting moments they once ignored. Arguments that were brushed off as reality TV drama. Conflicts framed as normal marriage tension. Now they looked like fault lines. Tiny cracks. Building. Waiting. Todd's past interviews started resurfacing. So did Kandi's. Suddenly, tone mattered. Facial expressions mattered. Pauses mattered. Moments that once looked forgettable now looked intentional. And this time, they weren't being watched by fans. They were being studied. Everyone wanted to understand one thing. When did this stop being love and start becoming strategy? Because no one wakes up and challenges a prenup accidentally. That kind of move isn't emotional. It's logical. And logic suggests planning. Which is when the conversation took an even darker turn. Sources began whispering something nobody wanted to put into words. And when it finally leaked, it hit harder than the court filing itself. That custody may not be the main objective. That it might only be the gateway. To money. To assets. To positioning. To leverage. Because once custody shifts, negotiations follow. And negotiations don't ask for permission. They demand compliance. Fans didn't want to believe it. They didn't want to turn a marriage plot into a financial thriller. But once the theory was out, it grew. Fast. Social media threads multiplied. Breakdowns of legal codes. TikToks explaining prenup loopholes. YouTube lawyers offering free analysis. Everyone started reaching the same conclusion, just in different words. If that agreement breaks, everything becomes negotiable. And when things become negotiable, so do loyalties. Suddenly, this wasn't about heartbreak. It was about a structure collapsing, an empire exposed. And at the center of it all, sat a woman who spent her life building, and a man now legally picking through it. Fans felt something shift. A tone they hadn't heard before. Not scandal. Not gossip. Fear. Because power battles aren't emotional. They're devastating. They don't break hearts. They break stability. And then, the quiet became louder. Kandi still hadn't responded. No press run. No late night post. No emotional quote. Nothing. Everyone waited. And when it finally came, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't long. It was cold, controlled, and almost frightening in its calm. A single statement. No anger. No accusation. Just, I want peace. Fans felt their stomachs drop. Because in real life, people only say that when chaos is already swallowing them. And maybe that's why it hurt so much. Because it sounded less like public relations. And more like surrender. The kind of surrender you give when you're outnumbered. Online reaction was brutal. Comment sections didn't whisper. They roared. How did it even get here? She didn't see it coming. He played the long game. Nobody spoke in present tense. They spoke like something had already ended. Something irreversible. Something ugly. But not everyone saw Todd as a villain. Some saw him as a father. Fighting. Reacting. Protecting. And then the story fractured. Into two realities. In one, Todd was a father risking everything to hold on to his children. In the other, Todd was a strategist reaching for leverage at the perfect moment. No one could prove either. And that's what made it unbearable. Because uncertainty is the most painful narrative of all. It doesn't comfort. It corrodes. The deeper fans dug, the more questions surfaced. Why now? Why during Broadway? Why after silence? Why not privately? Why legally first? Nothing aligned. Which is when a disturbing thought started circulating quietly. This didn't look reactive. It looked timed. Which made everyone go back. Further. To the very beginning. To early interviews. Early conflicts. Old conversations. Moments when Kandi spoke openly about money. About structures. About independence. And moments when Todd didn't respond. But listened. Listened very carefully. Maybe too carefully. Internet theorists started saying something that no one wanted to admit. Sometimes the quietest partner is the one collecting receipts. Not evidence. Pattern. Opportunity. And maybe, just maybe, this wasn't anger. This was execution. Because heartbreak is loud, but strategy is silent. And Todd was very quiet. which is exactly why the moment felt dangerous. Because if someone's loud when they're hurt, at least you hear the warning. But when someone moves in silence, you only hear the damage after it's done. And now, the damage was legal, stamped, filed, and irreversible. Kandi hadn't just lost a husband. She may have been standing on the edge of losing control, of narrative, of stability, of security. And the fans felt it too. Because once a legal story overtakes a human one, the ending stops being emotional. It becomes procedural. And procedures don't care about feelings. Only findings. Only orders. Only outcomes. And somewhere behind closed doors, an entire future was being rewritten on paperwork. Not memory. Not promises. Paper. And paper never lies. But it doesn't love either. As the Bravo universe leaned in, waiting for blood or truth, the question became unbearable. Was this about parenting? Or ownership? Was it protection? Or power? Because marriages end loudly, but empires fall quietly. And this one was crumbling in silence. The world isn't watching a divorce anymore. It's watching a collapse. A family unraveling in real time, under fluorescent courtroom lights instead of warm living room lamps. What began as a private separation has now become a public fracture, documents instead of dialogue, lawyers instead of love, and custody schedules replacing bedtime stories. This isn't just about Todd. This isn't just about Kandi. This is about what happens when a marriage dies in front of millions, and nobody gets to grieve in private. Some people will say this is strategy. Others will insist it's survival. And maybe it's both. Because in Hollywood, breakups aren't quiet. They're calculated. And every legal motion carries more weight than any emotional confession ever could. But here's what matters now. Not who filed first. Not who speaks loudest. Not who looks calmer. It's what the documents reveal next. Because buried inside those filings are answers the public hasn't seen yet. And once they surface, this story will change again. We are no longer waiting for statements. We are waiting for consequences. So stay watchful. Stay questioning. Because this isn't finished. Not even close. If you think this is the final chapter, you haven't understood the story yet. The silence hasn't broken. It's tightening. And the next move won't come with a warning. Only a timestamp. And when it does, you'll see it here first.